Hello, those of you that are watching this. We're starting late because we've been introducing ourselves, and that would be meaningless for you to listen to that since you can't see anybody. But we're just talking about how Narnia mixes together all different kinds of mythology and why people like that. And what were you starting to say, Paul?
Oh, I was just saying that the amount of imagery you're able to come up with just reading and listening to the readings of it, puts my imagination to overdrive.
Good. Did any of you notice that? And I mean, in some ways, a lot of good writers do this, but Lewis does this well. Do you notice how he appeals to all 5 of your senses? Mm-hmm. Like even smell. He mentions smell a lot, where a lot of people they'll tell you what they see and that's it. But the hearing, the feeling, everything is there. And it is very, very visual. I'm surprised there haven't been more people. Maybe it's just probably because it's not really out of copyright yet. But I'm just wondering 100 years from now, just like, for instance, you probably know that Dante's Divine Comedy, that's been done by Gustave Doré. William Blake did all that stuff. Salvador Dali. I mean, a lot of painters have done studies of Dante or Milton or things. And again, it might be because it's still under copyright. But sooner or later, I can imagine all different artists being inspired to do maybe studies or things like that. Good stuff. So, all right, we'll go on to Clinton there. You don't go by Clint. You're actually Clinton.
I go by Clinton, yes.
Clinton, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's not Clinton. What's that? Oh, was that it?
Oh my God.
Would you call him Millsap?
No.
We got that on record.
Yeah, it's on record. The Clinton Millsap. So I'm opposite Clinton. I'm a second year master's of painting and drawing student. I got my undergraduate at the Columbus College of Art and Design in painting and drawing also, and I have a small art school.
You mean where you teach
Yes.
People come to you individually?
Yeah. No, I teach workshops every 8 weeks when it's not COVID.
Oh, okay.
It's every 8 weeks. There's a whole curriculum that happens, but just painting, drawing, photorealistic drawing, hyper-realistic drawing, charcoal portraits, mixed media, all that stuff. So basically, I came to get my master's because I was hitting some roadblocks not having one. With some teaching opportunities. When they did the research and I didn't actually have a master's, I lost some opportunities to teach, and so I was like, I got to get that paper, so that's why I'm here.
And are you, by the way, are you starting, because you all know it happens in your second year fall, a lot of times the MFAs just sort of explode and find their way. A lot of times I've seen that.
This summer, I think all of us really made a bunch of work this summer that really changed and did a lot of things, I think.
Oh, it's amazing to see them just break through and wow, it's good stuff. He's also writing a novel. I got to read the first chapter, so he's doing some good stuff.
Thank you.
You got to bring all the arts together. That's the way to do it.
It's actually called Charlie's Adventure, believe it or not. Really, that's what it's called.
Did you grow up watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory?
I did grow up,
Yep.
but the Charlie's Adventure came from when I was driving in the truck with my dad, who's like a super contractor guy.
Okay.
And he was having a hard time relating to his little son, who was very artistic.
Right.
So he's like burly dude, right? And he's having a really hard time. We're driving in the truck back to his house in Pasadena, and we're passing all these oil refineries. And my dad's like, son, instead of comic books, you should write a novel about a guy who travels to different places. He's like me, when I was growing up, I read John Carter, and I was the cowboy would go into the cave, and he would go to another world where there's space or this. And so my dad's telling me, trying to relate, and he's telling me, and he was like, you should, instead of doing comic books, you should write a book about a kid on the farm who gets into trouble and goes off to different worlds. And I was like, all right, Dad, I will.
Oh, that's great.
And so that's kind of where it actually came from, was I got the idea.
Oh, that's neat.
And so that's actually where it came from. So my dad's name is Charles.
Oh, okay.
And so when he was growing up, they called him Charlie. So that's my dad's name. So that's why I was like, Charlie's Adventure.
Well, there's a fun book by John Steinbeck, the guy who wrote, Grapes of Wrath and East of Eden. He wrote a book called Travels with Charlie. Charlie was his dog. And he traveled, the minivan or whatever, all over the country, and it's travel literature. It's pretty good, though, all around America.
Another thing I do for my dad is all my drawing videos, the lead in, there's like a little trailer that leads in. It says Charles's Boys Productions.
Oh, that's
So
neat.
all the drawing videos I do, I have like the, it's like the, I got it from like iMovie. It's like the movie trailer thing. Well, it's like the world. And then if you listen to it, there's like a little crescendo and a music, like it kind of goes, and it does like a little world, and it says Charles's Boy Productions. But there's a little bitty clip of audio of me in the background of me going, "That's Charles's boy." Just like really, really quiet.
That's great. I love
Everywhere
it.
whenever I went to the country for the summers, I would go to my grandmother's house in the country for the summers. And everywhere I went, I was not me. I was Charles's boy.
Charles's boy. Oh
So
wow.
I'd go somewhere, and there was actually a feed store / country store you could walk to from my grandma's house. There was like one single street was downtown. I would walk in, and I could get anything on credit. Like you just walk in like in the westerns, you know?
Yeah,
You walk
that's right,
in,
yeah.
Put all the shit on the counter.
That's right, yeah.
We'll put that down for you. You go on ahead now. But I would go in there, and I could get Snickers on credit.
Oh my gosh,
and a
that's
Dr.
great.
Pepper. And so like my grandmother like got there, and it's like you settle up like every 3 weeks.
Oh my
grandma
gosh.
was in there, and she was
Like nobody even does that anymore, but there we go.
All these Snickers and Dr. Peppers. I don't know, Granny.
It's great stuff. See,
That's where I got all the stuff.
that's where you got to get it from. You know, you pull back and all those things, and you know, like I said, right here from the video I sent you, the professor here is very much based on that guy Kirkpatrick, very much like him, and Lewis's memory of him, and like I said, you don't want to never throw anything away, especially if you're any kind of an artist. Never throw anything away. And as I said, you know, C.S. Lewis, when he was learning under Kirkpatrick, remember I told you Kirkpatrick was an atheist, Lewis was an atheist, but when Lewis became a Christian, he didn't just throw away all that logic that he learned, he used it for a different method. And to me, that's just wonderful. If you can say anything that you learned, you can use it. And I like for instance, I remember when I was Colgate, upstate New York for undergraduate, I remember I took a class on India. I was really fascinated. I learned all sorts of stuff, and it's like, I'll never use that. And then I came to HBU, and I've got like 5-10% of my students from India. I never met anybody from India, really, until I came. It's like, oh, wow, I'm glad I studied that way back when. So, you know, don't let anything go to waste. It all comes in and enriches you, which I think is really, really amazing. So. And last but not least, R&R over here, Rob.
Story like that. So I'm a second year. My name is Robert. To be honest.
Hi, Robert. Hi, Robert. Hi, Robbie.
It's my second year MFA. My major or my focus is painting and mixing sculpture at the same time. I'm trying to combine the two. And see, I did my undergrad at Texas Southern University. You know, I majored in painting. Was recommended by my professors to pursue my master's, and along with another sculpture artist who's already well off out in the world. Gave him a phone call just to see if I could get some verbal influence, or how to pursue my approach in sculptures.
Right.
And so he whispered into my ear, "Say, Rob, you need to get a master's.
Oh,
It is
good.
your golden ticket." I said, "Really? Okay, well." So at the same time, I spoke with this gentleman named Kevin Cole. He's based out of Alabama, and he referred me to different, professors, and he heard of Michael Collins.
Okay.
And he was like, "Well, if you want to stay in town, check out HBU." And I was like, "Okay." So not only did he tell me about HBU, my professors there at Texas Southern told me about HBU, and Kingsley.
Kingsley, I taught him.
Yeah,
He did some great stuff.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Kingsley came to me and he's like, "Rob,
Photo realism right
yeah,
there.
exactly." So he's like, "Rob, I told Michael about you. I gave your number and your contact, so if you get a mysterious call or a voicemail that's about 5 minutes, yeah, he's like, that's him." I was like, "Okay." So before my graduating year at Texas Southern, I had a show in Midtown somewhere. I can't remember. It's not even there anymore. It's a small gallery. Michael was there,
Right.
and then I met him there, and he's like, "You're Robert." I was like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "I heard, but are you a student at Texas Southern?" I was like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Oh, I got to visit. I love TSU. My father, taught along John Biggers and this and that." And he's like, "Do you know this professor?" I was like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Okay, well, have you thought about graduate school?" And I was like, I actually haven't. I was like, I'm actually exhausted. It's cool. Because growing up, I was the man of the house. I was always working and had to provide for the family. So now that the family's doing all right, I can finally focus on myself. So by this artist in Alabama telling me about graduate school, and then Michael Collins, planting a little parasite about graduate school, and then
parasite.
He'd like to call it a mustard seed, but I say parasite
because it bothered me. It bothered me because it bothered me because like I said, it wasn't a goal. It wasn't something that I wanted to pursue. I was ready to build a foundation and have a family and go on with life and be an educator. I've always wanted to be an educator.
Right.
So my graduating, my thesis show, he was there. He showed up.
Great.
Called me. Here's some applications. Think about it. I was like, all right. So I filled them out. Poured my heart and soul out into why I wanted to pursue, a master's degree, my artist statement. He loved it, and here I am.
Wow. See.
So besides this graduate school and master's, now it's already being implanted in my head on pursuing a PhD. So he didn't tell me about PhD. It's so one of my mentors that's in Tennessee, he's always on me, and he bought a piece from me. So he's asking me, what are you going to do after graduate school? Okay, I'm going to settle down and teach this and that. He's like, well, you think about PhD? I was like, oh, come on. So
they won't let you stop.
Yeah. So he's like, at your age, I would have, within a heartbeat. So he's at your age, I would have been an RB, but I fell in love.
So what do you do a PhD in? You could do studio art, or would it be
studio art or
with a
art
PhD?
history,
Okay. Is that what you'll do? Which will you do?
Studio art, yeah.
It'll be studio art. Okay.
Here locally?
Yeah.
So he told me, these are different places. Texas Tech is one of them.
Okay.
But for me, if Texas Tech, if I don't pursue that, I do want to explore. So he was like, there's a lot of places like in Europe, in places around the world. And so he's like, you let me know.
Are you still single, or do you have a family?
I do have family.
Oh, they're ready to...
Oh, no, I don't have kids. I'm not married.
Okay. Okay.
No, solo.
Okay, so you can do it now. If you're going to go overseas, go now. Marcy, where are you thinking of going for a PhD? Well, where are you thinking of going for your PhD? Oh, it is Rice. Your husband's at Rice, isn't he? Yeah, our husband's at Rice.
Yeah,
Okay.
So, just like everyone, I think we're, finally figured out what we want to create and what we want to present to the world and live on with that.
Oh my God, that's great. So you're going to come back and be the new Michael Collins someday?
Oh no,
you got to learn to talk faster. Michael Collins, the only person that talks faster than I do. When he gets going, woo!
Oh yes, he does.
He's just great. And I will tell you, because I'm with him when he talks. He really does know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Because he'll go from one thing to another, and you're like, he's making all of this stuff up.
No,
He must be, but he's not. I've studied all that stuff.
Documentation.
He's got it right there. That's right, he does. So now,
don't believe
is Riojas related to the Spanish word for red?
Yep.
I'm
Actually,
thinking that.
red wine.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking.
it's,
Is red? You're wearing red. Is red your signature color?
Oh, yeah, it is.
Okay, see, you got to go for it.
Yeah. So in Spain, there's a small town called Rioja, without the S.
Okay.
So it is, known for their wine. I believe it's southern Spain.
Okay, see, so that's good.
So there's not a lot of Riojas's out there. I think I'm the only one at HBU
Okay.
with Riojas, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, that's neat. Red, so it just comes out there.
Yeah.
What is your signature color, Amanda? Are you a pink person? You're wearing pink there.
Oh, for person?
Yeah. Are you? What is your signature color? Is it pink like your bandana?
What do y'all think?
Your signature color?
Yeah.
Your signature color is hat.
I see.
No, she wears a hat. That's her signature. You always have a hat on.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I see blue, like a light.
I like to wear a lot of colors. I don't
Pastels?
have one.
Mhm.
I'm
Good
just-
stuff.
I just had come from working out, so this is
Oh man, I tell you. Anyway, well, let us start now. I emailed you all. It's a course pack I put together. It's a PDF because it's like you'll see it's got a lot of my notes on it because I just went through all my C.S. Lewis books. And we're not going to look at all of these things, but it'll just give you a little bit of background. Because what I tried to do is go through all 7 books and find bits and pieces from Lewis's other books, because he wrote so many books that have bearing on this. And we're not going to have time to go over all of them. But if you look at the first one, like I said, if you don't have a hard copy, you can just look on, that's fine. But the one that's listed as number 1, you see big circle, number 1. I think the best way to start is to read a little clip from an essay Lewis wrote where he talks about what he was trying to do in Narnia and what he was not trying to do. Now, I think I already mentioned it kind of quickly in the video, but we'll say again that it's actually a misnomer to say that the Narnia books are Christian allegories. They're not really allegories, right? Because an allegory, when you read an allegory, right, it's 1-to-1, exactly 1-to-1 correspondence. Have you ever actually read Pilgrim's Progress? Something that people don't read, but they've heard of it, right? I mean, it's one of those books that was literally for 100 years, it was the second bestseller after the Bible, maybe even 200 years. And again, it's a kind of a code where one thing equals something else, 1-to-1 ratio, and that's it. By the way, there have been times in the history of the church where the churchmen were a little bit embarrassed by what book in the Old Testament would you think might embarrass some clergyman? What book in the... Hey, you got it exactly, the Song of Solomon, right? Because and what's really interesting about the Song of Solomon is that it not only, glorifies erotic love, but it doesn't talk about children at all. Now, I do believe that you're supposed to have children. Okay, what I'm saying is it's interesting because the Song of Solomon is just a focus on physical love. And the reason I bring that up is there have been times in church history where people try to turn the Song of Solomon only into an allegory. Now, my reading of it is also meant to reflect God's love for his people, but it's also a real lover. And people do, by the way, debate whether it's Solomon and a woman or whether it's a shepherd and shepherdess. You can read it. It really depends how you read it. But what I'm saying is that I do think it has a second meaning about God and his love for his people, but you don't want to reduce it to that. It's also a real love affair between a real couple. So if you want to think about the Narnia books, it's not an allegory. It has a second level of meaning. And the best way to talk about that is you could read, well maybe, how old were you, Amanda, when you first read these books?
I did read them. My mom read them to me first grade.
First grade. When she first read them to you, did you know that they had like a Christian meaning? Because I read them pretty young too, and I didn't know that. But I enjoyed them completely as fantasy novels. And then later, when I learned that, went back, I just got more levels of meaning. But again, you may know nothing about Christianity, and it still has a full meaning. Aslan is a full character with his full meaning in this world. It's not a simple 1-to-1. And like I said, now, he is linked to Christ, but he's not an allegory for Christ. As I explained, he's the Christ of Narnia.
He's a Jesus.
The Jesus of Narnia, right? Because in Christianity, right, you have the Trinity. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Right? We won't say Holy Ghost anymore. I don't know what's holy about a ghost. But anyway, but God the Son, okay, what we call the second person of the Trinity, right? For Christians, he was incarnated as Jesus of Nazareth. Lewis said, and he called it a supposal, which that's a great word, a supposal. Oh my gosh, I won't even go into this, but I remember, I won't go into it. We had some bad administrators who use words in a very crazy way. I won't go into it. But anyway, a supposal, he said, what if the earth is not the only world out there? Right? What if there are other worlds in other dimensions? Right? This is not like another planet. This is another dimension that works on a different time frame as our world, with another dimension. And what if God the Son, the second person of the Trinity, were also to be incarnated in that world? A world of talking animals, walking trees, living streams. What might he be like? And Lewis said he would be Aslan. And by the way, Marcy, you wouldn't happen to know any... No, it is. It's Persian. Aslan is the Persian word for lion. Can you? No, I'm sorry, you're right. It's the Turkish word, not the Persian word. Do you know any Turkish? You know Turkish. Yeah, it's Turkish. That's right. And Lewis said that somewhere. It's the Turkish word. And I remember at least once looking at a newspaper, and there was like a Turkish general, and his name was Aslan. I thought that was, well, basically, the name Leonidas of the 300 Spartans, that means lion too. Leo, like the name Leo means lion. There was a couple popes named Leo. So it's a great name. But and that neat, so it is that. And it's kind of funny that in this book we get to see Turkish delight. Have any of you ever eaten Turkish delight? Probably had it. Now, it's an acquired taste. It's one of those things that's kind of sickly sweet. So you might like it or not like it. If you were the kind of kid that liked all those gummy worms and chewy, super sugary things, you might like it. It's kind of like a gelatin, and it's got powdered sugar on it, and it's sweet, and you use all different fruits and essences and things like that. I think if you go to a place called Droobies, have you ever heard of Droobies? It's like an Arabic bakery.
It's right over here.
Isn't it close? Yeah.
Or no, it's on Voss.
Well, yeah, that's right. Droobies, I think you can buy Turkish delight there if you want to taste what it's like. But again, it's sugary sweet, like some of the Indian desserts I've had from India. I mean, I don't know what an American Indian dessert is. Dessert? I can't think of one.
Fried.
What? Something fried? I don't know. But in India, yeah, they have some really sweet things. I remember eating that were like pretzels, but like they were made out of pure sugar.
Or dates.
Oh yeah, the dates. That's right. And then, like in China, they have desserts that are made out of bean curd. It's really sweet.
The red bean curd.
Yeah, that stuff. Yeah, it's really wild. There we go. Well, I've always commented on that. Like if you're American and you eat Chinese food, you recognize all the foods you're eating, right? But when it comes to dessert, what the heck is that? That's a dessert? It's just funny how the desserts to me are completely different in different countries. But anyway, so he is not an allegory for Christ. He's the Christ of Narnia. And in that sense, the White Witch is a Satan figure, but she isn't actually Satan, but she's a Satan figure. But other than that, like I said, it's not like you can say Peter is the Apostle Peter, right? Or Lucy is John. It doesn't work that way. It's not a one-to-one ratio. It's a story that has layers of meaning. And in that sense, that's true of Lord of the Rings as well. And as I said in my thing, Lewis actually wrote an actual allegory called The Pilgrim's Regress, which is an allegorical version of his coming to faith, his testimony. So, but anyway, let's look at this. And it's number 1. And on the first column, you'll see there's a line through it and an arrow. And again, this is Lewis explaining what he did to people who thought this is just a Christian allegory. He says, "Let me now apply this to my own fairy tales." He's going to tell us how he did it. "Some people seem to think that I began by asking myself how I could say something about Christianity to children, then fixed on the fairy tale as an instrument, then collected information about child psychology and decided what age group I'd write for, then drew up a list of basic Christian truths and hammered out allegories to embody them. This is all pure moonshine. I couldn't write in that way at all. This is not generally how great art is made. That's not what he was trying to do, but a lot of people think that. Now, I would argue that once he started writing the second book, Prince Caspian, then there might have been a little more of that process. But when he wrote the first book, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, he did not set out to write a Christian allegory. So what was the cause? He explains it here. He says, everything for him began with images in his head. And he tells us in another place, when he was very young, he started having these dreams and images and all that sort of stuff. He didn't say that by driving in the car with his dad, by the oil things. Anyway, he says, I said everything began with images, and these are some of them. A fawn carrying an umbrella, kind of a strange thing out of mythology. A queen on a sledge, a magnificent line. Now, he does say, because he wrote a bunch of essays on this, in another one, he said, I had all these images. Are you able to find it? It's number 1 in that course pack?
Yeah, I have it.
You have it? Okay. You may have to turn it sideways or something and read it however you do it there. But but in another place, he explains a little bit better that I had all of these images and I didn't know what to do with them. And then all of a sudden, the image of a lion bounded in and drew all the stories together. He says that in another version of this. But here, it started with images. At first, there wasn't even anything Christian about them. That element pushed itself in of its own accord. It was a part of the bubbling up of creativity. Now, are any of you in this room into King Arthur stuff? Nobody's into Arthuriana? What object in the stories of King Arthur is the most specifically Christian? Somebody must know. Say it. The lion? Oh, no. In King Arthur? In King Arthur legends, what image in the King Arthur legends has the strongest, like, Christian imagery? Think about it. What is everybody looking for? Okay? The sword? Come on, somebody knows. The quest. Okay, yes, you're getting close. The quest for the Holy Grail. No one's ever heard the quest for the Holy. At least you've seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Okay, that's good. That's a start. That's a start. What's that? Who is?
My son.
Oh, your son. Does he understand all of the comedy at his age?
I don't know.
Because some of it's pretty deep and even kind of political and in a funny way. But you haven't let him watch Life of Brian too, have you? That is funny, but not at his age. But anyway, but okay, you've probably heard of the Holy Grail. Indiana Jones went looking for it in the Last Crusade, and it's famous because the Holy Grail is supposed to be the Grail where Jesus did the Last Supper, right? But also when he was pierced in the side while he was on the cross, Joseph caught the blood in there, and that's why it's got the miracle working power. Okay, the reason I mention that is probably the first time we are introduced to the Holy Grail is in the writing of Chrétien de Troyes. He was a French writer from like around 1300 or so. He's a little bit older than Mallory and Monmouth and the British versions of this. And what's interesting is if you read his story of Percival, and any Wagner aficionados here, the guy who did the Ring Cycle, he also did an opera called Parsifal. Percival was the original guy who got the Holy Grail. Later on it became Gawain who got it, but in the beginning it was Percival. But what fascinated me is the first time I read that story of Percival and the Holy Grail had nothing to do with Christianity. It was just a magic cup. But after you read the description about the blood and it's also linked to a spear, somebody must have said, oh, whoa, this sounds, and then brought it together. But the original, the first time it appears, it's almost more of a pagan symbol. So that's just fascinating. And again, of what Lewis says here, it just starts as a fantasy and then slowly elements, and then, that literally, Clinton, that may happen with your story. As you start writing it, things are going to push themselves in. Yeah. Other parts of your life, it may not be Christianity, but other parts of your life, they start pressing in. And it's really exciting. And, I did write a children's novel myself, and maybe I'll bring some copies later. We're not supposed to have any paper. It's kind of weird, but anyway. Like we're not supposed to pass out paper or something, what they told us. That's why right now, everybody's supposed to do their midterm and final online. Of course, you guys are doing oral presentations, so you'll have to do that. But yeah, Marcy and the other two, you'll do it online. It's not that hard. Well, you did it last time. You remember how we did it? It'll be the same. It'll be the same. I'm glad I had a dry run in the spring to learn how to do all of this craziness. But anyway, okay. So first were the images. And the artist, Lewis the artist, wants to do something with those images. Then he says, then came the form. We might say the genre, the media, whatever we're talking about. What is the form that it's going to be put into? What kind of a story? Is it going to be a novel? Is it going to be an epic? Is it going to be a drama? There's all different things you could do. He said, as these images sorted themselves into events, that is, became a story, they all started lining up into a story, they seemed to demand no love interest and no close psychology. In other words, not a Freudian novel. I don't want to get deep into the motivations of my characters. And he's not against it, but he said the images are not calling for that. It's not a love story. It's not a romance. It's not a exploration of people's motivations. That's not what the images were calling out for. But the form which excludes these things is the fairy tale. So almost by process of elimination, he said, well, what am I going to do? It's not going to be a romance, and if it's not going to have psychology, it's probably not going to be a novel, especially not a modern novel, which are usually very psychological. So the fairy tale it is, and the moment I thought of that, I fell in love with the form itself. It's brevity. What does that mean? Brevity means it's short. Does anybody know who said, brevity is the soul of wit? Everybody's heard that. It comes from Hamlet. That's what Polonius says. It's funny because Polonius is an old windbag. But he says, brevity is the soul of wit. And then he goes on to talk. It's really funny. It's severe restraints on description. Now, Lewis does give us a lot of description here, but he's thinking, I'm not going to be writing like the Brothers Karamazov. You ever read those Russian novels that are always described, or even worse? Anybody ever try to read Les Miserables? Marcy, did you say you know French? You know French, don't you? Yeah, have you ever tried to read Victor Hugo in French? Short? Because he loves detail. Like Les Miserables goes on. It's like well over 1,000 pages because he describes or some of you probably have read Charles Dickens before. Lots and lots of description, right? So that's not what the images are called. That's not what fairy tales do. It's flexible traditionalism. What do you think that means? That's a great, think of that for art. What do you think that means? Flexible traditionalism.
It means that you can take something that's grounded in reality and kind of bend it to what you need it to be.
Okay, good.
It still feels real because it's not so far out that you can't imagine it.
Okay, good. So there's rules here, right?
Right, there's rules, but it allows people to see what they want to see.
Good.
And so your stories, as traditional as they may be, by being flexible in their symbols and in their descriptions of places, are sort of timeless then.
Good.
So you're not stuck in a genre of time.
Good. It's nice to be able to play with things, but it's not completely freeform. There are certain things that have to happen.
There's
Certain.
still campfire, there's still plates, there's
Good.
still need to eat.
Okay, good, right.
There's all those grounding things in the storyline that.
But then you can play. I mean, now, those are the artists. Have you ever gone through this process? Like, you had some images and you try to figure out what was the proper medium. Is it a painting? Is it a sculptor? Or even if it's a painting, does it want to have oils or does it want to have watercolors, right?
I think that sums up first year of graduate school.
Oh, maybe that's a good point. That's true.
Yeah,
What-
now that we're second year, just like, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, now you play around. And now it's like, now you've experimented in every medium, know what it can do, and now you've got to feel like this. This demands this kind of story, or these kinds of colors, or it demands something more abstract or something more figural. It's allowing the image to find its own container. Right? As if the water itself could find the water bottle that it wants, or something like that.
Yeah, well, and I was going to add to what Robert said. It's like, so you go through that process. I think every time you do something creative, and it sounds like, and I know for me, it's like the minute I sort of hit on it,
Right.
then it sort of does itself. It takes care of itself. It sounds like C.S. Lewis in writing his book, once he had characters
Right.
in his head and came up with the fairy tale, the story wrote itself.
Good.
And in some ways, I think that's how art.
And it does, doesn't it? It comes with it. You know, and just a simple example of traditionalism. If you're going to write a fairy tale, there really needs to be a bad guy somewhere, right? Not every novel needs a bad, but it's not a fairy tale if there's not a good guy and a bad guy and something like that, and probably some kind of helpers for you. But you could play with it. You can make the bad guy a little bit different or something, or make him likable and then not likable. But so there's still flexibility. But there's certain things that have to happen, or it's not really that genre. It's like it's a romantic comedy. There's what has to happen in a romantic comedy. The boy meets the girl, falls in love with her, and marries her. Is that a romantic comedy? What has to happen?
It's the Hallmark Channel.
Yeah, but what has to happen? Can you go directly from boy meets girl, boy falls in love with girl, boy marries girl?
No.
What am I skipping?
He messes up.
He's got to mess up. He's got to lose the girl at some point, or it's not a romantic comedy. Right? It's often just a misunderstanding, but there has to be. And almost every romantic comedy, the boy and girl have to have some kind of sidekick. Right? They could be likable, they can be annoying, depending what you want to do with them. But usually there's going to be other people. And usually, if you're the guy, your male friend is going to be like afraid of commitment. So he's going to represent the side of you that fears commitment. And then the girl, she's going to have, her girlfriend might be, she was burned by a few boys, and so she doesn't trust any men anymore. Right? That kind of stuff. So you sort of need sidekicks, but you can do different things with them. You can make them different kinds of people if you want. But the form, certain forms demand. I mean, if it's a Western, there better be a shootout at some point. There's got to be something like that because the form demands it. If it's a musical, they got to start singing at ridiculous moments, right? He rolls his eyes. They've got to do that, right? So, flexible traditionalism, but it's inflexible hostility. Remember, fairy tales. It's hostility to all analysis, digression, reflections, and gas. Gas means like getting too big for yourself and thinking about life, and it's like, no, it shouldn't have super long meditative passages. Now, as we're going to see, there's lots of meanings to this as we go into it, but the fairy tale doesn't allow for you to just insert a 1 chapter long sermon. It just doesn't work like that in a fairy tale, right? And again, this is not just a children's story, it's specifically a fairy tale, right? And in a fairy tale world, anything can happen, but there still needs to be rules, right? Like a fairy tale world, you can do anything you want, but don't pluck that rose. Does anybody know what famous fairy tale gets started when somebody plucks a rose? What's that? Beauty and the Beast. Very good. And in the full story, it's the father who plucks the rose, and then he's imprisoned by the beast, and then all that. But it's again, it's a beautiful world. All that, you go into a castle and you get anything you want, but don't pull that rose, or don't open a box. Who opened the box? You know her name? Pandora. Okay, don't open a box. Don't do this. Don't say the wrong word. Whatever it is, be careful. So, fairy tales have rules, but also anything can happen. There's kind of an ongoing joke. When my kids were young, I would read them from the Red and the Blue Fairy Book. Have you ever heard of these books? They were done by Andrew Lang 100 years ago. The Red Fairy Book, the Blue, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. And we remember reading a story called The Enchanted Pig, right? And have you actually heard that story? Anyway, it's really cute. And, the princess, wants to marry somebody, and a pig comes to the court to sue for her hand and asks the king, I want her hand in marriage. And after he finishes speaking, the king says, "Oh, pig, you are more eloquent than I expected." And of course, we laugh with my kids. He's not surprised that the pig speaks. He's surprised that the pig speaks eloquently. So that's an ongoing joke in our house, right? But that's how it works in fairyland. You just take for granted that things can happen. But again, it's not anything can happen. Again, there are rules that you've got to abide by. And a lot of times in a fairy tale, the bad thing happens when somebody does the wrong thing. Takes the wrong thing and ends up having to go on a long quest and all that sort of stuff. So fairy tales are neat. Okay, he said, I was now enamored of it. I had fallen in love, first with the images, and then I was actually in love with the form or genre or medium. Okay, its very limitations of vocabulary became an attraction. It's still for kids, so you can't use super big multisyllabic words. You have to use fairly simple words, right? And watch this, and I wonder again, artists, as the hardness of the stone pleases the sculptor, or the difficulty of the sonnet delights the sonneteer. Can we explain that? How can the hardness of the stone actually please the sculptor? I don't think people tend to do sculpture like that here. You work in clay, but it's a little bit different. I've never seen a raw piece of marble hanging out there or something. I don't know if anybody teaches you how to do that anymore. But how could Michelangelo be pleased by the hardness of the stone? Because you understand he shouldn't be, because the hardness of the stone is the thing that's making it so difficult.
They know the limitations.
Oh, that's good. And have you ever?
There's no surprises in the
Good. Have you ever had to be more creative because of the limitations of your medium?
Always, yeah.
You have to do that.
Is that the definition of being creative?
That's a good point. Working within limitations.
Yeah.
And like the sonnet is a very difficult thing to write because it has a very tight rhyme scheme. It looks like this. Some of them are A, B, B, A, A, B, B, A. So 8 lines, but only 2 rhyme schemes, 2 rhyme words, A and B. Very difficult, but it's a challenge. Like, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to write a lyric for a song. But, if somebody gives you a song and you have to write a lyric that fits it exactly, that's an exacting song. Like hymns. If you're writing, I don't know if any of you have ever done this, but maybe you take a hymn and then you write new words for it. But then you've got to set it exactly. And that, by the way, that always upsets me when I'm singing a song and the second verse of the song has extra words mixed in. So I'm sorry, that's cheating, okay? That is cheating. And a lot of them do that. It's like, give me a break. No. So all these little 8th and 16th notes are mixed in there. It's like, no. Yeah, yeah, but that's right. No, you need to do this exact. This is an exacting science. But there's actually a pleasure to it. And even me as a writer, sometimes I do like stupid things like I don't like the big gap in the word here, so I'm going to change it around so it looks nicer. But to me, somehow that brings out more creativity. And maybe you're right, Amanda. Maybe that is almost the definition of creativity in art. Working within limits. Molding something that resists you. Right? That becomes part of the process, whether you're writing or drawing or a photographer. You're always fighting with it, but it's like a fight in a good marriage or something like that. What does it say about friends in the Bible? It says, as iron sharpens iron. Have you ever heard that? So one friend sharpens another, right? And you rub off each other's. And again, if you go into marriage thinking you're going to change your husband or wife, you're just a fool. But you might be able to refine each other by that process. You hope you can refine each other, but don't, like I said, don't go in changing the person. Mistake. Oh, he doesn't even like the refining part? We're still working on him there. We're still working on him.
31 years later.
I've heard people say that, like, after 25 years, they finally say, I guess I really can't change my spouse. After 25 years, that, like, hits them, It really is funny. Okay, now he says, on that side, as author, I wrote fairy tales because the fairy tales seemed the ideal form for the stuff I had to say. That's why I chose it. I chose it because the images demanded it, and then it sort of took a life of its own. Okay, now comes the Christian part, because that's part of who Lewis is, right? Just like, let's say, maybe you're not a Christian, but you're like a Freudian, let's say. Now, the Freudian part of you says, oh, I could use these images to do something deep from what I've studied in psychoanalysis. Okay, so whatever the man means, the part of him that has special beliefs or special ideas or special goals, and he wants to get that into his work. That sort of stuff, right? So that would be like I mentioned Moto before. She's from Japan. So maybe her images demand something, and she starts to make it, and then she's like, I'd like to add a little Japanese nuance to this from my childhood. See, that would be kind of what's going on here. Something personal to me, and people like that in art. They always want to know, And I'm sure you're annoyed because everybody always takes for granted that all art is autobiographical. It's not always the case, although we're always influenced somewhat. I mean, we're not like robots or machines. Some of ourself is going to come into that. Right? Okay, now he explains it. Then, of course, the man in me began to have his turn. I thought that I saw how stories of this kind, the fairy tales, could steal past a certain inhibition which had paralyzed much of my own religion in childhood. Remember, he grew up in a Christian family, was baptized as an infant, was confirmed and all that, but moved away from it. Okay, he says, and I wonder if any of you can identify with this. He says, when he was young, he said, why did one find it so hard to feel as one was told one ought to feel about God or about the sufferings of Christ? Thinking of Easter, or Good Friday on the cross. I thought the chief reason was that one was told one ought to. An obligation to feel can freeze feelings, and reverence itself did harm. The whole subject was associated with lowered voices, almost as if it were something medical. Now, I don't know if you all understand this. Paula is actually my age. I was going to say close to my age. Almost exactly my age. She just looks much better than I do. But do you remember, like, your parents or grandparents, they would say something like, oh, poor Aunt Ethel, she has cancer.
Yes.
Remember people would do that? I don't think they do that anymore. Do people hear that? You still hear that somewhat? I remember that more when I was a kid. It's like, talk about it.
You wanted to be discreet.
Discreet,
About
yeah.
maladies or, something.
You say quietly or something like that.
Yeah.
Your Aunt Maria.
Oh, there we go. But it's not even the hushed tones. Like, oh,
Yeah.
this is so serious we can't talk about. Did anybody feel like that? Did any of you like grow up in a church where the fact that they expect you to feel a certain way made you not feel a certain way? Have you ever had that experience? Just in religion sometimes. This is the way you should feel. Well, you know, I would think particularly if you grew up maybe like in a more Pentecostal home where, you know, people are raising their hands and they're like expecting you to be that ecstatic. And sometimes, like, we often think that a little kid would be more like that, but not always. Some kids are reserved, just like some adults are reserved. They're not always like that. In fact, Lewis, once said, I can't remember where I read this, but he was at dinner and there was another family next to him, and he heard this boy, they gave him prunes, and he heard the boy say, "I loathe prunes." And Lewis just suddenly felt a connection to him, you know, and he loathed that, you know. And it was just, and again, not all kids like fairy tales. I'll get probably the best example of what do parents want to bring to their children's birthday because they think all children love these things. You hire somebody to be a clown, right? Were any of you terrified of clowns?
I don't like them.
I mean, like I said, not all kids like. Some kids are terrified by clowns. It's really funny. Adults too, but but again, sometimes when there's how many of you have had the experience where a friend of yours makes you watch their favorite movie with them, and you can't enjoy it because they keep expecting you to have the same reaction as they do? Have you ever had that?
Yeah.
Spoil. Just be quiet. The best part's coming up. Come on, stop. Shut up, or I'm leaving. I cannot enjoy a movie like this, right? So when he said, and we do that sometimes. We of course, it's kind of funny to imagine, you know, a British family trying to force someone to feel something. They're British, you know, but of course he did grow up in Ireland. But again, it's when you push a kid to be kind of phony, to pretend they felt something that they didn't feel, right? Or that they enjoyed something, like taking them to the park. Most kids like swings, but not all do. I mean, some of them get seasick, whatever. I mean, and there's a lot of kids that certainly don't like that spinning. What do they call that thing?
The tire.
Like the tire, the thing spins around and all. They still have that spinning gate. Is that what it was called? That thing you hold on, it spins around really fast.
Parks don't have those anymore because they're so dangerous.
Oh, they're so dangerous. There we go. See, they've gotten rid of those things. But again, that's what Lewis, and this is what I love about Lewis. You see how he's never forgotten his childhood. And I really do. Like I said, I believe that you will be the best kind of teacher if you remember what it was like to be a student. You'll also be a good parent if you remember what it was like to be a kid, and try not to forget that. I mean, all of you at some point in your childhood said something like, "When I'm a parent, I will never do this to my kids." Write that down, because you're going to forget if you don't write that down, okay? All of a sudden.
It's just genetics.
Yeah, I know, it comes right out.
You're like, oh my Lord,
If you don't think about it, it comes out. You will naturally fall into those rhythms if you don't really think about it, right? Okay, so this is how he explains it. I just love this. All right, he says, "But supposing that by casting all of these things," and now he's talking about the Christian element, because in a sense, the line, the witch of the word, is going to replay the gospel story of the crucifixion and the resurrection. Let's imagine, okay, that by casting all these things into an imaginary world, stripping them of their stained glass and Sunday school associations. What do you think that means? Stained glass and Sunday school associations. What's often done to like Bible stories when you're in Sunday school? A little kid. What do they do to those stories? Yeah, they kind of strip them down, simplify them, make them all seem sweet and whatnot.
We always had the felt,
The felt, that's right, those felt things, that's right.
the like character, whatever.
That's right. Would it burlap or whatever that stuff is, and then you could stick on it, it's like it sticks on, that's right, yes, I remember those.
Yeah.
Like the story of Noah and the flood with all the cute animals and forgetting about the flood, just killing everybody, right? And I mean, let's put it this way. Has anybody ever told you that particularly the Old Testament, if the Old Testament wasn't the Bible, we wouldn't let children read it, right? It would be rated R, that sort of stuff. So sometimes we sort of emasculate the stories and strip them down, and they lose the real wonder and power that they have, right? I mean, Christianity is a really weird religion because you cannot fully explain Christianity to your children until you've had your talk about the birds and the bees. Right? They can't fully... Now, I remember what I did when my kids were really little. I would say, Mary says, but I can't have a baby. I'm not married. And just leave it at that, right? Because I'm not ready to explain to them. But, they can't fully understand it until they know about sex. It's kind of an amazing thing when you think about it. Kind of amazing. And
I'm actually going through that right now.
oh, should I explain? Yeah.
Yeah, I asked him if he believes in Jesus. And he's like, yeah, I think Jesus was alive and he's a great person, but I don't know about seeing God.
That's it. He's thinking about it right at 9. Okay.
I just can't really understand that, I just thought it was so interesting.
That's interesting.
Understand that he was God because he was a man.
Yeah.
Like just a man.
See, that's good that you let your son actually ask that question. Because sometimes we're like, we tell it to them and they know that we don't want to hear them say, I don't understand this, so they just say they do. And so that means you're a good parent if he feels comfortable enough to say that, right? And it is difficult to understand. And, one way to do it is you talk about superheroes and then you move on to the real thing, so that Hercules, okay, or somebody like that. Like, why do all the pagan peoples, kind of what I talked about in the video about the Corn King. Why don't all these pagan nations have stories about dying and rising gods? It seems like they're reaching after something, but maybe one time it really happened. Like there was magic, right? And remember, people. It's really funny how a lot of Christians have no problem with miracles except the virgin birth. It's like, oh, God can't mess with sex. There was one time when God created Adam, out of the dirt, So it's just you're just putting it, and once he put that in there. So, but it is difficult, and it is great magic. It's the magic of it. Oddly enough, it is the very magic of marriage. Because how does the Bible describe marriage? 2 into 1, 2 that are also one. Sexuality is 2 into 1, right? So that is the magic at the and even one way to describe it, just a pregnant mother, where the mother and child are one, but they're also 2. Now, of course, Christianity, the incarnation is going to go beyond that in a way we can't understand. But a lot of people talk about it. It's just imagine somebody living in Flatland. There's actually a book called Flatland. You ever hear that? Imagine somebody that lived in a 2-dimensional world trying to understand 3 dimensions. They wouldn't be able to understand. Like, whoa, they wouldn't be able to understand it.
Yeah.
Now, here's something that will blow your mind and may get some artwork out of you. Okay. If you have a 3-dimensional object, like anything, okay. Oh, by the way, I did ask you please not to put on any scent, because I'm really allergic to cologne, perfume. But if you really want, this is unscented if you need it. But I will say the good thing about all this is everything I'm reading says that this is really not being spread by touch. I mean, it's good. Hygiene is a good thing anyway, but really that's why these masks are the most important thing. It really seems like it's airborne. It's not primarily that. In fact, I'm reading that. I don't even know if they have any absolute documented cases of some, like you're sick, you touch the desk, and a half hour later I touch the desk and touch. I don't even know if they've it can happen, but I don't even know so. But yeah, that's it. So be careful. But like I said, these really are the most important things. And I got to say, I've been pretty impressed. The last week, the HBU students are wearing masks. The teacher, I don't see anybody messing around. The only time a few times I saw people all congregated. I got to say though, Marcy, I felt sorry for some of the Muslim students of ours who are not only wearing a mask but their heads covered too. They must be really hot because we have a lot of students. And I saw some students congregating, but other than that, people have been obeying. And as long as we can make sure that our kids in the dorms don't have wild parties, we should be okay. Because that seems to be what shut down UNC and other places. Kids got there, had wild party, boom, down there going.
Yeah.
The ironic thing is the two quickest places to get COVID are in a bar and in a church. But particularly if it's a church where everybody's singing. Because that's what it said, the singing actually, and the bar, when you go into a bar, they're always loud. So if you talk to someone in a bar or a club, you have to scream. And so everything's coming out. That's doing it. Or drinking, yeah, everything's coming down. So, actually, my church has been meeting, but for the first time on Sunday, they finally were able to do the Lord's Supper you can buy these little plastic case. You've seen that? Has your church done that? Okay, yeah, that's how they're doing it now.
See, because in the Catholic church, I'm Catholic, so
Yeah, you can't.
I go to, I get communion every week.
Oh, wait, the bread and the wine?
Not the
That's what I heard. Just the bread, right? Yeah.
Just the bread. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
the Eucharist.
And I was talking to somebody who was Catholic, and she made the point. It's like they can't do that little plastic thing because it has to be consecrated first,
It does.
and then especially in the Catholic Church, like if you don't finish, if the wine's not finished, you don't throw it away. Okay, it's you either drink it or put it in the ground. I think.
Yeah, so it has to drink it.
Yeah.
And then has to finish it off. So,
Yeah, it has to be finished. So that's a tough.
You can do it, but you can just pour, a small amount.
I guess you
of wine
could.
in there that's then transformed into a
Oh, and do little things like that. So it's pretty wild. I mean, like I said, that's like a central thing in the Catholic Church, and you can't even do communion. That's really bad.
Well, you can do, you do.
But you have half of it. You do the host.
Right, and it's considered a full communion just with the.
Oh, it is considered okay.
It is, and then it's an added bonus if you get the blood of Christ too.
Okay.
Because during the flu.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
At all different times they stop it just as a matter of not spreading stuff. So.
I remember people got really nervous back in the AIDS days, in the 80s, whenever it first broke out. And in the Orthodox Church where I grew up, you know how Orthodox do it? They got this big chalice, and the guy takes a spoon, and there's bread in there, and he gets the wine and a little touch of bread, and feeds it to you one by one. So everyone's really nervous about that, that's how they do it. He feeds you one by one. And
Incantation?
yeah.
Yeah. Where you
Oh, that's right. There's others that's right. Dip it. I've seen others. But I think what the Orthodox are doing now sometimes is lean your head back and I'll pour it into your mouth. I mean, a joke or something like that. But it's all these things we never even thought we had to worry about, and now we're worrying about it. So it's really funny. And at HBU, whenever you're faculty or staff and you have a birthday, they always want to give you a little gift, something from the bookstore. And one of my colleagues got a gift, and it was a little measure, tape measure, a little tiny one that you pull out and says HBU. And he came up to me and said, "Man, they want me to use this to measure out 6 feet." And I said, "No, I got one in January too. That's this year's gift, or whatever, But 1 year it was that little thing that counts your steps or something. All these cute little things. But anyway, oh my gosh. So, okay. HBU what? Oh, he's got the hat.
I did not have a tape measure. Thank you very much.
Oh, you didn't get the tape measure. Are you considered an employee too?
What's that?
Are you an employee of HBU to get the gifts?
No. But I buy they're making fun of me because I buy a lot of HBU gear.
That's good stuff,
No, hey, I waited 20 years to get my master's.
That's right.
So I'm super proud of being here, and so I buy all kinds of stuff. I have the HBU pen.
Oh, this is good. And well, you'll be very happy that
I got the HBU binder.
this. And you know what? This only started about 4 or 5 years ago. Now, when you graduate, they give you one of those things you put around your license plate. Whatever they're called. And it says alumni and it says HBU.
That's nice.
And that's smart. I mean, that's good advertising because when you're stopped at a traffic light, don't you end up looking at the person's license plate? It's like right in front of you. So it's good advertising that
The only
way.
thing I have is a sticker that he convinced me to get.
He convinced you to get the sticker.
School of Fine Arts.
That's right.
I got to get another one. I've got a new car now. When my old car had a sticker that said "Ashland's on the move," so I got to get a new one to put it on there. But actually, I got it at some place I spoke. They gave it to me, but
That's awesome.
Ashland is on the move. Yeah. So anyway, so that stained glass and Sunday School Association, it was just they over sentimentalize it, that sort of stuff, and it seems kind of icky or whatever, And Paula, we do have to be fair that some of the Catholic art is pretty icky.
It's horrible.
Yeah, some of it's really, what's the word, maudlin? I don't know what word we would use. Some of it's just.
And some of it's depressing. It's it's still in what I would, there's a high amount of guilt that used to come with the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to slowly move out. John Paul II did a good job
Did he? Yeah.
of moving you out of, trying to move the church out of that. And really celebrating gifts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He wrote about the artist or something. I read that.
Yeah, the gifts of the artist.
Yeah, I read that. It's good.
Somebody just sent that to me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it was all just really more about instilling fear and the lightning's going to strike if you say the wrong, do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, whatever.
I remember when I went to Colgate, and they had their university chapel or whatever, and the guy, I swear he was like Mr. Rogers for adults. This guy's a really nice guy. But I remember he always had to give this speech. Okay, in some Protestant churches, when they do the wine part or the grape juice, whatever it is, they got that huge thing that they pass around. And you hold it, and you pull your little cup out, and then you pass it on. It's a little bit heavy. And he always used to have this big speech. Now, if this falls down while it goes by you, don't worry. You're not going to be struck down. 'Cause I think a lot of people were terrified that it was going to happen like that. It's okay. We'll clean it up, But again, he wants to give it a new kind of power. So it's not old hat and all that sort of stuff. So he says, and look at this great language. So stripping them of their stained glass and Sunday school associations, one could make them for the first time appear in their real potency, in their full power, because they've become too domesticated from all the Sunday school things and the little cartoons and all that sort of stuff. They've lost their power, their freshness, and seem old hat. I remember, if I'm your father, when my kids grew up, at night, sometimes I would tell them Bible stories, and sometimes I would tell them Greek mythology stories. And we'd go back and forth and fairy tales and everything. And I remember still, when they were still fairly young, I said, okay, now we've made our way through the fairy tales. Now I'm going to take you through the Bible stories. They're like, nah, we don't want that. Oh my God, my kids are heathens at a young age. But after questioning them, I realized that they thought, well, we know all those stories. We heard them in church before, right? We know all these stories. And then some kind of inspiration just hit me. And I said, all right, kids, starting tomorrow, I'm going to take you through the Bible, starting in Genesis, the basic stories, but I'm going to tell you the story from God's point of view. So I had to do a lot of work, and I memorized the story and then figure out how to tell it from God's point of view. And they were in rapt attention because they were hearing the same stories afresh and new. And, when you're a kid, your dad's a little bit like God anyway, right? So, I mean, and it was just, or Michael Collins, a little bit like God. And I love Michael Collins. I've been here a long time. So I was here when Michael was here, and then he left for many years, and then he came back. And all I remember was when he came back, I said, yay, the IRA is back on campus. You get that joke? Okay. Yeah, you know that. You see the movie? Liam Neeson, Michael Collins was one of the revolutionaries of the IRA. Anyway. Do you know, for a while, everybody thought that Michael was Catholic. I did too. I don't know why. But he's not Catholic. No, he said he's Protestant.
Well, he's right. When he was raised.
Oh, he was raised Catholic. Okay. Because I think I don't know, Methodist or something like that.
Episcopal.
He's Episcopal. Well, that's pretty high church anyway.
That's almost Catholic.
Yeah. But yeah, that Irish side in there.
It's just that
Almost Catholic. It is, yeah, see. This is a great group, man. You guys are a fun group.
Pretty much the same prayers all the way through.
No, it is very similar. It is very similar. So he says, could make them appear in their real potency. Then he said, could one not thus steal past those watchful dragons? Now, what a wonderful way. The watchful dragons are the things that are ready to pounce. Like my kids, the watchful, I know those stories already. So I'm going to do an end run around you, and you're going to hear the same stories but not know it. That would be like if I wanted a kid to read a serious book. And so I took a book, but then I took a comic book cover and put it around so they would be fooled into reading it. Because they have to be pretty stupid to think it's a comic book if it has no pictures. But anyway, that idea, right, where you have to get them in there. You have to get past all those inhibitions. And like I said, a lot of times those inhibitions are I know all this already. What are you going to teach me? I've heard these stories 1,000 times. And it's like, no, we're going to sneak by, right? So that was the man's motive. But of course, he could have done nothing if the author had not been on the boil first. So the bubbling had to happen first, and then Lewis the Christian. Lewis the artist got it bubbling, then Lewis the Christian came in and gave it a different shape. And again, I think that's an interesting way of thinking of, again, being a Christian artist in terms of the fine arts as well. How do you bring in a spiritual dimension without smacking people on the head or something like that? And that's what I've loved teaching in HBU. I'm just amazed at what people come up with. And like I said, that second year epiphany, you have to wait till next year, Chris, when it just suddenly comes together and it's like, whoa, and you find your form. And like Michonne, some of you know Michonne, I mean, just suddenly she just discovered a certain kind of thing. And remember Robert Sanders? making those giant statues, all of which were incredible. And then all of a sudden, he found that form, that's sleek, and it's like, where'd that come from? I mean, it's obvious where it, I mean, you can see the link, but just all of a sudden, it's just wild.
That was a monster up in the hole. I thought it was a nice group Sunday.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. It's just wild stuff. He's a teacher, too. He teaches over at FBCA. Fort Bend Christian, yeah. He teaches over there, so, oh my gosh. So, well, we'll press on. If you have to go to the bathroom, go and come back. This way I can let you out a little bit early. Why don't we just do that? But, okay, let's talk. I mean, these are children's books, so it takes a little while to get into them, right? But you notice that these children, okay, during World War II, have you ever heard of what's called the Battle of Britain? What was the Battle of Britain? That's when the Nazis were doing what? It's before we came into the war. What did the Nazis do to break the British spirit? Because by 1940, they'd taken France and everything. Britain was alone. Good. What they did is they flew over London and other places and dropped bombs. Right, to just sort of... What's that?
Didn't London Bridge burn?
Yeah, a lot of things were destroyed, and it's amazing how much was not destroyed, miraculously. One bomb landed right in front of St. Paul's, but it didn't go off. It would have destroyed St. Paul's Cathedral, which is amazing. But and this actually happened because of the bombing raids in London. They evacuated a lot of the children to the countryside, and Oxford and Cambridge are kind of in the countryside, about an hour and a half train ride or so from London. And Lewis actually, back around 1940, was taking care of a group of children who were refugees. I mean, they still had parents and all, but and that actually back in 1940 he had the seed of the idea, but he didn't go with it for like another 10 years. But he actually took care of some of those kids. And I mentioned that Mrs. Moore lady drove him crazy, but it was good because she helped him to bring those kids in, and it inspired him. But have any of you seen the movie? The big movie, the Hollywood movie of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? See that? Okay. Because if you remember, that's got a great beginning where it actually starts with one of those bombing raids. And they come in and you see them blow it up and the kids running and you see the four Pevensey children. And they even add something that's not in the book, but it's really good in the movie, is Edmund, who turns out to be the traitor. Remember? Do you remember why he doesn't listen and he runs back in the house? He leaves the shelter? Do you remember why? Good. It's a portrait of his father. And his father is fighting in the RAF, the Royal Air Force. And it fits with the novel, but in the movie, that's like his hero. And it works really well in the movie because I think it's been a while now since the movie came out. But if you remember, Mr. Tumnus has a picture of his father. And that's actually mentioned in the novel. But in the movie, they make it very clear that his father was a sort of resistance fighter against the White Witch. And so we've got this wonderful duality that the movie does. And it just adds it. And interestingly enough, one thing that the movie does, and it's even more true in Prince Caspian, is it actually increases the psychology of the kids. Like we actually get into the mind of the children more. And remember this, okay, after this book, right, the kids grow up in Narnia. And then they go back home and they're kids again. And then in Prince Caspian, a year later, they go back. And Lewis didn't even think about this because that wasn't what he was thinking about. But could you imagine being, whatever, 11, 12-year-old kid, and you go into Narnia, you grow up and you're a king, and you got to come back and be a kid again?
It's just like Jumanji.
Yeah, like you actually, that's a good point, yeah. And Lewis doesn't even worry about that. But in the movie, Prince Caspian, they make a big deal out of these kids trying to deal with the rough edges and all that sort of stuff and all that. And it increases the psychology. And I think it makes for an interesting addition. And I think Lewis might have enjoyed it. He would have said, I wasn't doing that. But I think he would have found it fascinating. So the movies add some good things. The biggest thing in the movie is it doesn't quite capture the full power of Aslan, as we'll see in the novel. It's good, but it doesn't quite, and we'll talk about that more as we get into it. But again, the house that he stays in, the Macready, the house that he stays in is very much based on that little Lee, right? Remember I told you the wardrobe was with all the long corridors and they're running around and going crazy and enjoying themselves. And it's good that we take our time. Like I said, one of the reasons why you have to read this book first is it takes so long to get to Narnia. Right? You notice how it works? First, Lucy goes by herself, comes back. Then Lucy and Edmund go and come back, and then all four of them go. And so we are being slowly introduced to, and I think it's very fitting that when Hollywood decides to make movies, what do they start with? Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Because that is your initiation into the world of Narnia. And it's slow. We have to get to know these kids, and then all of a sudden, and again, still, that's one of, were you haunted by the idea of the wardrobe, Amanda, when you were a kid? This idea that you open up a door and you go to another place? Not as much? That idea of the hidden doorway, of a connection point. What do they call them? The Celtic people call them thin places. Have you ever heard that phrase? There are places where the connection between our world and other worlds is thin. Any of you ever watch Outlander? Oh, that's really good. Okay, Outlander. I think Outlander's kind of neat. I really like it. I've ruined my daughter now. She's not going to love any man that's not Jamie. So that's pretty hard to live up to it. And like I said, this sounds kind of weird, but Outlander may be the only show that has quite a number of sex scenes, but they're always between a husband and a wife. Did you ever think about that? How rarely you ever see that? In a movie or something, it's always between lovers or adulterous lovers or something. The idea is then you get married and you stop having sex. That's sort of the idea you get from Hollywood, which is kind of a shame. The image is from what is it? I Love Lucy. You get married and have separate beds. What's that all about? Okay. Didn't that confuse you when you were a kid?
We couldn't quite figure that out. And if you notice, if they sat on the bed or laid on the bed, one foot was on.
Yes, that's right. They do that. All these rules.
Stuff.
Oh, I thought it was.
Wow.
No, but it's interesting, Just so that way there was no connection.
That's right. Yeah.
Was, off the par.
It is interesting. I don't know. I tell you, but the I forgot what I was saying. Anyway, but the idea. Oh, I was talking about Outlander. Okay, the idea of there being points of connection. When you were a kid, you ever see a movie called Time Bandits?
That was great.
I love that movie. It's Terry Gilliam, who did Baron Munchausen, a lot of crazy things, 12 Monkeys. But anyway, he was one of the Monty Python people. He was the only Monty Python guy who was an American, and he didn't do much acting. He was mostly the cartoonist, is what he was. He did a little acting. You see him. He's a good director. But the idea is that there's a map, because creation was so sketchy that there's holes. And these dwarves steal God's map so they can fall into a time warp, go back 200 years, steal something, and escape into the future. That's the whole idea of Time Bandits, which is really great. And it's really a fun movie. Sean Connery's even has a small role in it. But this idea is fascinating. I mean, this idea that right around the corner can be something else. And, I don't know if you've ever heard of N.T. Wright. Have you heard of him? He's a good Christian theologian, Anglican theologian from England. And he talks about, in Christianity, it's not really like this is the earth and heaven's up here. It's more like the kingdom of God is right alongside us, and it always breaks in. It's always breaking in and then leaving and stuff like that. It's not completely separate. It's there. Heaven is not up there. Heaven is another dimension, whatever that means. Right? And I always think it's cool. You've heard of people that have those life after life experiences. And what is always part of their experience? They die, and what do they always go through? A tunnel. And whether these things are true or not, I've met a few people that I certainly think it was true. I can just imagine if you're getting from Earth to another dimension, right? It would make sense. It would be like a tunnel, something like that. What's that?
Have you read Imagine Heaven?
Is that a new one?
John Burke wrote it.
Oh, I haven't read that yet. That's not the Heaven is for Real, kid.
Like 1,000 people's near-death experiences.
Oh, I've got to look for that one because I've read a lot of those books.
Good. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you haven't read it.
I have to look for that one because I've read a bunch of different ones.
Read it. It's amazing.
I heard it really upset me, but somebody said that the book Heaven is for Real. The little kid said that he made it up. That's what I.
That kid is in the book.
But he's in the book. But some people say that he. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Wild stuff.
The
He's
dad
like
did
6
it.
or something.
Yeah.
He met Jesus. And then
Huh.
an artist actually, I forget her name.
Oh, the girl who did the picture.
Paints Jesus.
I've seen those paintings. Those are amazing.
So that little boy saw her painting.
That's right.
That's Jesus.
And that was in the movie Heaven is for Real. They added that in the movie. That's right.
Yeah.
I still love that book. There is a book out there I have on my shelf called something like 12 Minutes in Hell. Somebody who said he went to hell and came back. And it's really scary, but it seems like it's real. I don't know. But
I have to say, though, that they're having to do an Inferno class,
That's what we did, yeah.
Draw all the different rings. I know a lot of people, I've decided over the summer, who belong in different rings.
Oh, there we go. You can find it. We did the Inferno. That's right.
I was like, oh my God, which ring you're going to, buddy?
Oh, man. That's how you know. There's the ring. And, the rim for, like, bad students is you're locked to your chair with your eyes propped open by pins, and you have to listen to the most boring lecture over and over again. This is great. But, yes, it is fun to find places for your friends and enemies. And myself, that's right. Where would I be, right? So, anyway, this concept is so beautiful. And she ends up, and, it's really funny, because, of course, I've read the book so many times, but it wasn't until I watched the movie with Mr. Tumnus, who's become quite a big actor now. That guy's in everything these days. And when you watch the movie, didn't it seem a little bit freaky? Like, why is this girl going into a cave with this half-naked man? I was never scared when I read it. But when I saw it, it was like, that's a little freaky. I don't know if I want... I mean, what you think about it? But it is important, though, that in the book, Lewis says that it was like they were friends immediately. And that was the idea, that they suddenly just identified with them. They were like soulmates immediately. And Mr. Thomas is really... What's that actor's name? He's in everything now. He's the new... oh my gosh, I can't remember his name. He like the X-Men. He's the new Dr. X.
Dr. X, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you're fast. You can find it quickly. I see him in everything these days.
No one ever had a problem with Mowgli talking to Baloo the bear. I mean, the giant naked bear.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. But just little. It's still a bear. Little girl, come to my cave. I don't know. It's just
Bear skin.
bear skin.
James McAvoy.
McAvoy, thank you, James McAvoy. That's it. Yeah, like I said, every time I turn around, he's in another movie.
He was a Spider-Man.
In Spider.
McAvoy.
Oh, I think he was the bad guy, maybe.
He was one of them.
He played that scary guy in the new M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
Split. And then he comes up again he was really good in that. Woo! Playing all these different split characters, split personalities. Anyway, so we go in and we meet Mr. Tumnus, right? And again, this is the power of Lewis. Now, like we said, generally speaking, having Father Christmas makes no sense at all, right? You can't have Father Christmas if you don't have something called Christmas, and you can't have Christmas. But I think that Lewis did it partly so he could have that phrase, the White Witch has made it always winter, but never Christmas. What does that phrase mean to you? What does it connote? It's such a powerful phrase. What does it mean?
You're stuck in hell.
Okay, like you're stuck in hell. You're stuck in...
It's cold and there's no hope.
Good, there's no hope. There's Christmas is never coming. You get through the coldness as you're waiting and waiting. It's like a winter that never gives way to... You're getting cold. A winter that never gives way to spring.
Well, it's like whenever you're a kid, that time of the year is always such a nostalgic.
Good.
It's the nostalgia of the season more so, and so if you take away that powerful nostalgia of people.
Good.
Memories.
Do you remember that phrase when you were first read it, when it was read to you as a kid?
Yeah.
And did it mean a lot to you then?
Well, my family always did a lot of traditions.
Right, okay.
So I was thinking, like, oh my gosh, we never got to do Christmas.
See?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And by the way, did you notice when they meet Father Christmas, we'll get there later, but when they meet Father Christmas, they did that in the movie, but they added one of my favorite lines in the movie. Do you remember what Lucy says when she sees Father Christmas? She looks at him and she turns to Susan and she says, I told you he was real. And that's actually an addition, but it really works well. I think Lewis would have liked that line. So there's a few things that the movies did well. Some things they didn't do well, but other things I think they improved in many ways. So they're worth watching. But she goes in there, and again, we find out that Narnia is in bad times, right? And I think every child can understand what that means. Always winter, no Christmas. You're stuck in something. And like Paul said, there's no hope. There's no family. There's no nostalgia. There's no sense of a new beginning that's around the corner. And it's been like that for 100 years. And again, this is not Lord of the Rings, so we don't worry. Where did she get her? Why do they have all this food when it's been winter for 100 years? Where did she get the darn sewing machine? We don't worry about that stuff. Okay, this is Narnia. That's why when they made the movies, they spent a lot of money making every single creature distinctive with distinctive weapons, and that was really cool. But it's unnecessary. For Lord of the Rings, it is necessary. I'm glad they spent that money because that's what Lord of the Rings is. It's a real meaty place. But Narnia, we don't worry about those details in Narnia.
No, but the foreshadowing in this, like, until we were just sitting here, I was like, I didn't even think about the fur coats in the closet because all that I conjured up was cedar closets that my grandmothers and great-grandmothers had. These closets full of, old, hideous-looking coats. And I didn't even think about them stepping off into snow. So that was totally the foreshadowing with the fur coats and everything else. And I was like, man.
Foreshadowing to the animals.
To the animals.
Right.
The animals and the cold. And it's like, why would this old man have fur coats in his house that he occupied?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. What are they doing in there?
Yeah.
We had some big friends in that kind of
This was a nice time. History.
These two, I could just see a sitcom right here coming. It's great. It's great stuff. That's gonna be fun. Well, I'm sorry, but all this summer, when I think of Clinton, I've been imagining that monster thing that you've got on your Facebook for a while. That big, he's like a, what do you call it, an ogre or something? What is that thing? Yeah.
It's an ogre.
All summer, I've just sort of imagined you looking like the ogre or something. It's really cool. Maybe he does. I'm waiting for that. Well, I just love that. That's
all good. I could be an ogre.
You be an ogre. Good stuff. You're a friendly ogre. But the
ogre.
Oh.
Okay.
That's actually my alternate Instagram thing is the art ogre.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
I'm going to see a new part of Paula that I didn't see because Clinton's here. This is good.
Yeah.
We're going to see the more witty side here.
Except for the NLA guys up at the front.
Yeah.
Everybody's really serious.
That's right. Yeah, serious.
Because there's so much things to talk about, I thought.
With Greeks in Rome. That's right. We can have a little more fun here. Sort of move it around and things like that. It's just fun. But by the way, do you know why people put coats in cedar closets? Yeah, because the moths don't go. But here, I mentioned that because here, they smell a mothball. They mention a mothball falling out. Yeah. And then popping out and stuff like that. Balls and stuff like that. I've got all those allergies to plastics, but I would not give up plastics. It's the only thing that keeps out bugs. Thank God we have plastic, That's the only way you can keep them out of your food. You got to have a thick plastic thing, and they're not going to go in there. Unless they're there already to begin with. You have to watch out, like with rice and stuff. But anyway, so Mr. Tumnus is, again, right now he's a sort of double agent, right? And by the way, the movie also made a good job. She is the White Witch, right? Her face is supposed to look like paper or like snow, right? In the movie, she doesn't really look like white. Maybe they thought it would look too silly. But do you know who she really looks like in the movie? Does anybody know who Eva Braun is? Come on, nobody knows who Eva Braun is? A historical person. That was Hitler's wife. What I'm saying is, I thought they made her look more like Aryan or something, because it is, and it's during World War II, and the implication, and it's in Narnia, it's in the book, but it's made clear in the movie that they've left one good versus evil war between the totalitarians and the democracies, and we've moved it to another place. So that in the movie we really get a sense of the wolves as being a sort of secret police, or what do you call those people? The Gestapo or something like that. They just increase that. And maybe, like I said, if her face was painted white, it might have seemed silly, like she was what are they in Japan, the geisha girls or something like that. But so they made her a little more realistic. But she's supposed to be. And what's really interesting is, when the witch is described, does anybody notice the colors that describe the witch? It's two colors that describe her. It's white, and what other color? It's red, right? Because her face is completely white except her lips, which are blood red. Right? Now,
like Snow White.
Like Snow White, that's right, right? What do they say? What? Say it again?
Same sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, actually, yeah, she's a little bit like Cruella de Vil, isn't she? Yeah. Cruella de Vil. And but now what's interesting, in this novel, later on, we meet somebody else who is also red and white.
The reindeer.
The reindeer, okay.
And,
We meet another figure. we meet another figure who's red, very red, ruddy face and red clothes with a long white beard. It's Father Christmas, okay? And Father Christmas is what we call Santa Claus. They call him Father Christmas. And Father Christmas is really what character in a Charles Dickens story is basically Father Christmas? It is Scrooge, yeah. What do they call him in Scrooge? They call him the ghost of Christmas present. That's basically Father Christmas, holding the big cornucopia and all that stuff. Come in here, man, and know me better, right? That's who he is. He's what's that?
No, sorry. There's a Muppets Christmas.
Oh, I love that. That's one of the best things they did.
The one where he's like,
yeah, I love it.
No,
I love it. Know me better. And Michael Caine is really good in that movie, playing Scrooge. It's really a good movie.
You mean Michael Caine?
What did Michael? Did I say
Michael
what?
Caine.
Did I say Michael Caine? Michael Caine.
It's Michael Caine.
Yeah,
You said Michael Caine.
Michael Caine. That's right. That guy's cool. And nobody knows, unless you're old enough, that when he started acting, he always played what's called the Cockney. You know, the poor guy, the scalawag. And now he almost always plays, like butlers and stodgy old aristocrats. It's kind of funny how he completely changed his image as he comes along. He started by being in a movie called What's It All About? Alfie. Okay, playing the ladies' man. He's very good at that. But yeah, it's great stuff. So we it's interesting when we set these two color codes against each other. The witch who's got a white face, because just drained of life, but those red lips, which makes her a little bit like a vampire. And it's interesting because later in the book, they're trying to figure out who she is, and they say, well, I'll show you the passage, because it's a perfect example of how Lewis mixes things together, but I think in an interesting way. I'm trying to find it. 1 second. Almost there. Here it is. It's page 8. Is it? I've got so many different things. I think it's 147. Yeah, 147. At the middle of the page, where it said she'd like us to believe it. You see that there?
Said Mr. Beaver?
Yeah, she'd like us to believe it, said Mr. Beaver. And this is how he's going to describe the witch. And I think it's fascinating. Okay. It says, but she's no daughter of Eve. She comes of your father Adam's. Here Mr. Beaver bowed. Your father Adam's first wife. Her they called Lilith. Do you know who Lilith is? And this is actually part of the sort of Jewish Apocrypha, or if you've ever heard of the Kabbalah. It's a sort of strange story. Have you ever heard who Lilith is? Okay, Lilith was Adam's first wife. Right? This is like an old, it's not in the Bible, but it's in some of the Midrash. And she was, in a way, she was like the sort of the first feminist. She wanted all the control, and in some stories she actually wants to be on top when they make love, and they actually say that. And she, would not submit, whatever, and she went off and became a demon. And Lilith is what's called a succubus. Have you ever heard of a succubus? That's the man sees this beautiful woman, but when he goes to bed with her, she turns into a fiend. If you've ever seen that scary movie, The Shining, with Jack Nicholson, in the bathtub, he meets a succubus. And there is a male version, ladies, watch out, it's called an incubus. Watch out. And the story is Lilith will suck the lives out of little babies and stuff like that. So she's a scary figure from sort of Jewish mythology, if you want to say that, okay? But he also compares her to the jinn. Marcy, do you know what book first talks about genies? Jinn? You know where they appear? What holy book has jinn in them? It's actually in the Quran. It doesn't say much, but it's in the Quran. It's jinn. Now, we spell it genie, okay? But it's also spelled jinn, as in J-I-N-N, or it's sometimes spelled D-J-I-N. And they're mentioned just briefly in the Quran. And then, of course, they appear in the Arabian Nights, okay, which is the great folklore in the Muslim world, right? Just like Brothers Grimm would be in the Christian world or something like that. And it's interesting that she's compared to a genie. So we've got sort of Jewish folklore, Muslim folklore, and then she's also, and of course she's tied to Satan, but then she's also linked to the giants, which is really, there are giants in Greek mythology, but giants are much bigger in Norse mythology, is where you really see the giants and all that sort of stuff. So isn't that an interesting mixture of all these. And the jinn are really strange figures. They're described as being kind of made out of smoke and stuff like that. And they even appeared in that really disturbing thing by Neil Gaiman called American Gods. I don't know if you've seen that. But he's got jinn in that as well. It's a pretty strange one. But again, it shows how he's pulling together all of these images from different places, religions, mythologies, trying to get at the archetype, at the type or symbol that has resonance in all different places. Now, one of the most important things, well, let me see. All right, well, trying to see how far I want to go. But let's talk a little bit more about Aslan, and then we'll come back and pick up other things. There's a word I want you to learn today that's going to come up a lot in this class, because it's at the core of Narnia and why it moves us. And that word is the numinous. Numinous. The numinous is something that when we experience it or come in the presence of the numinous, it gives us like a shiver. We used to say goose flesh or goose pimples. Right? Here, I'll give you all a sense of the numinous. Mufasa. Remember that? You seen Lion King? Mufasa. That's the numinous. Okay? The best example of the numinous, when does Isaiah experience the numinous? What happens in Isaiah 6? Do you know that? In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord mighty upon his throne, and the smoke came out, and Isaiah was terrified. Does anybody know when he cries out? "O Lord, I am a man of unclean lips, from a people of unclean lips." He's almost crushed, but still joyous, right? He's in the presence of God, but a sort of terror that brings out a sense of awe. And I think you know that one word that's really lost its meaning is awful, right? It used to mean literally full of awe, awful or awesome, another way of putting it, right? And it's kind of lost a little bit. Or even a word like wonder and mystery used to be that. And the best way I can explain it is, okay, Lewis wanted, especially his children readers, to understand something that I think we've forgotten, especially in America, that we can be happy and scared at the same time. Or we can be joyful and serious at the same time. Because as Americans, sometimes we're too giggly, even in church, right? That you can feel that sense of... That's why I love... Do any of you feel that way when you listen to like Celtic music? Just a sort of sense of awe, like just kind of... You're smiling and you're serious at the same time. Right? That different... Or if you've ever heard, like, what do they call them? The Vienna Boys Choir? You know, when they sing, and I remember when I was a kid, I'm like, I don't want to hear a bunch of boys singing soprano. But as I got older, I would listen, and it does. There's something, or when like if you hear the Oxford, Cambridge singers sing Christmas carols out of England, it grabs a hold of you. It weaves a spell or a mystery around you.
Yeah.
Now,
I can know.
You feel that?
I understand that because there's a movie called Midsummer.
Wait, oh, that's a new one. Wait.
Yeah, maybe it came out like 2 years ago.
Is it actually any good? I couldn't tell.
It is really good.
Is it based on like old pagan kind of? It looks like. I saw that. I think it's on either Amazon or Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like small cult.
So it was good. It wasn't.
Scotland,
Okay.
Or somewhere out there, but they have that. They have the music, that Celtic music.
Oh yeah.
And but the music the scene that it's related to, you're like, oh, this is good, but oh.
Yeah, you're scared. You know.
Yeah, you're scared.
But we don't think, as you'll say later, when they first meet Aslan, they realize that something can be beautiful and terrible at the same time. Right? We're either serious or laughing, and we don't realize there's something in between. That's what church ritual should bring out of us, a sense of, just sort of a sense of wonder, the mouth open as you're listening. And okay, HBU doesn't have a whole lot of traditions, but one of the traditions we used to have, and it was so stupid we finally got rid of it, but we had this tradition, I'm not making this up, if somebody came to speak for like convocation, they would say, let us now give a traditional HBU welcome. And this was the welcome, right? Imagine you're the speaker, you come on, and they say, this is what you do. Sit down. You could tell when they didn't warn the people because they looked freaked out by it. Oh my gosh, one time I got to speak and I'm like, man, that's freaky. And I thought, this is the stupidest thing in the world. But then I suddenly realized there are a few places in life when we stand up but don't applaud. Can you think of any? I can think of two.
National anthem.
Good. I hadn't even thought of that one. You stand up, I guess you sing, but you're right, but you stand up. I mean, again, we're older. Do you remember when people did not applaud in church?
Oh, yeah.
It was kind of looked down on, right, if somebody did a worship song. Now, and then there was a period where people were like, should I be doing this? Right? And now everybody just applauds. And do any of your churches say no? Seems most have kind of given into that. But it's I forget what I was saying. Oh yeah.
When we stand up.
Okay. When we stand, but I didn't think about that. Okay. Have you ever done jury duty? When do you stand up?
All rise on the judge.
Yeah, and you still see it. You see it in enough movies, right? All rise, honorable judge, whatever. And I will tell you, I remember, a few times, I've never exactly been in a jury, but I've been called many times. Half the time I didn't get, but several times I got in and got close, but never got in there. But I remember thinking to myself, because you know what happens. You go up and then they ask you questions. And have any of you ever said to yourself, man, I'm going to mouth off and say something stupid so they'll throw me out? And I remember, I can imagine you doing it too. Did you actually do it?
Yes.
You actually did it, only Clinton. Because I remember I came up there and I thought I was going to do that. And then there's something really almost spiritual. The judge comes in and at least it sobered me up. Okay? And it didn't get to me. I can't, but I just remember thinking, wow, that was weird. Now here's another one. Ladies, okay? There was a time when everybody stood up for you but didn't applaud, Paula. Did you say it? At marriage, okay? And that only struck me a long time afterwards. When the bride comes in, everybody stands, but they don't applaud. Now, when they kiss and they say, I now pronounce Mr. and Miss, then people applaud. But when she comes down the aisle, you don't applaud, right? But you stand. Have you?
Also, that's also traditional. Also, I think more in the South is when someone comes into the room, if you're coming to a table, a man will stand.
That's true. They used to do that. It's like a Jane Austen. Do you still do that, Clinton?
Yes, Clinton's
Okay, so see, he's a gentleman. He's a what's the
Southern gentleman.
Southern gentleman. Okay,
A gentle ogre.
a gentle ogre. A gentle ogre.
He's just like a mixed bag like Narnia.
I just imagine Clinton saying, "I'm saving me ass." Great line.
We don't have layers.
There he is. Oh my gosh. When you were younger, did you like to say, "This is Sparta" all the time?
I did a lot of things for movies.
Okay, I know that. See, it's great stuff.
Huge movie quoter. Yeah.
See, it's, I used to teach film. One day we'll get back. I taught Hitchcock to MFAs a couple times. It was a long time ago. And they came up with some really cool projects based on Hitchcock movies. That was really cool. We went scene by scene. And oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. That would be the end of your love of birds, probably. Yeah. That would purge them out, right? But the idea of the numinous is again, and another place would be like John chapter 4, Revelation chapter 4, when John comes before the throne, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. And it's that sense of coming into the presence of something powerful, and it fills you with joy, but almost crushes you at the same time. And haven't you ever heard people say that it's nice that we can understand that, God can be our friend, Jesus is our brother, but sometimes we overdo that. Sometimes we get a little bit too familiar, maybe with God, right? He's my buddy or something like that. And sometimes we do lose a sense of that awe, that wonder. Good? That's it? Yeah. And Lewis, that's one of the things Lewis literally wanted to restore. Teach people. And the famous place where they first feel that, and you might know where I'm going to read here. It's on page, here it is. It's page 1. Oh, no, wait. I've got so many things I can't find. I think it's 141. Yeah. Page 141 near the top. When they first meet Mr. Beaver. And if you remember in the movie, Lucy puts out her hand and he's like, what do you want me to do? Well, you're supposed to shake it. And he says, why? I don't know. We kind of forget how to shake hands too. Okay, where it says, they say Aslan is on the move. You see that part there? They say Aslan is on the move, perhaps has already landed. Notice World War II imagery. That's what happens when the Allies land and come in and liberate, right? So it's very much that. He says, and now a very curious thing happened. None of the children knew who Aslan was any more than you do, unless you've already read The Magician's Nephew. There's another reason to read them in the proper order. But the moment the beaver had spoken these words, everyone felt quite different. And they're about to experience the numinous, something that shocks them and almost takes them out of themselves. He says, perhaps it has sometimes happened to you in a dream that someone says something which you don't understand, but in the dream it feels as if it had some enormous meaning. Either a terrifying one which turns the whole dream into a nightmare, or else a lovely meaning, too lovely to put into words, which makes the dream so beautiful that you remember it all your life and are always wishing you could get into that dream again. Wow. Again, different. And sometimes the influence of the numinous can have different effects on different people. Right? It can fill them, it can give them hope, or it can terrify them and move them away. But again, and by the way, just to show you, and now I do love, can anybody tell me what putti are? Putti, P-U-T-T-I? Or a puto, that would be similar. Come on! Art history. Do you know, Marcy? Okay, like in Raphael paintings, they have those little cherub baby angels. Those are called putti. And they appear all over the place in Renaissance art. Okay? And one of the things, especially since the Victorian age, people always want to depict angels as really cute and pretty and sweet and stuff like that. Is that how angels appear in the Bible? No. Okay, think about it if you know the Bible. What's the first, almost always the first thing an angel says to, like an angel appears to me, and what's the first thing they say to me? Do not be afraid, fear not. Which means, obviously, I'm looking terrified. But that even includes when Gabriel comes to Mary, right? Do not be afraid, fear not. The angels are often numinous figures. They're frightening figures, okay? And they're usually more masculine type figures, where ever since the Victorian age, but really it goes back to the Renaissance, they're more of a feminine kind of thing. C.S. Lewis put it this way in one of his books. I remember reading this, that the first thing a biblical angel says is, fear not. The first thing I can imagine a Victorian angel say is, now. I love that again. So that we've lost a sense of, I don't know, have any of you heard this? That some people have blamed Walt Disney movies for an increase in people being mauled by animals. And what would you think the connection would be?
Oh. Well, the dancing bear. I mean, everybody feeding them like Cinderella.
Good. And so what have we lost? We've lost our proper fear and, in a sense, respect of wild animals. We forgot. We've domesticated them so much. Let me go pet them. Rips off your arm or something like that. And apparently that's actually happened. I've read that we have to be careful and not lose our sense of again, reverent awe.
But I've been receiving a lot of, I'm painting a big series of bears.
Uh-huh.
This family who went to Baylor. And I've been receiving now all this YouTube videos and things of people in national parks where the bears are basically coming up and sitting with them.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And that they're really relying on the tourists
to feed them.
For the food.
Oh.
Yeah, which is also dangerous.
That is dangerous, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you all saw that video that went viral several years ago about this person that raised these lion cubs, and they grew up, and you see the lion cubs jumping and hugging them and stuff like that. Did you see that a while back? That was really amazing. Well, you've probably heard of, what's that? Tiger King. Oh, I haven't seen that. I still wonder what that is. I can't figure out what that is. I keep seeing it on, you know how Netflix works. If you turn it on and don't immediately go to your program, it'll start talking to you. And it's like, but that is funny. But the lions and tigers and bears, oh my. But now, according to the Bible, what is the beginning of wisdom? The fear of the Lord. Now again, that doesn't mean a crushing fear, but a reverent fear and awe in the presence of God. So again, all of these things, Lewis wanted to help restore them. And we're seeing it right now. Now, we get to hear the actual impact on each of the children. It says, it was like that now, At the name of Aslan, each one of the children felt something jump in his inside. Right? Ooh. We're still on page 141. 141. It says, Edmund felt a sensation of mysterious horror. Right? Because Edmund's already been in Narnia. He met the White Witch. And he feels like, and you know, remember, God is light, but light can warm you and illuminate you, or light can also expose you, right? Kind of like the old days where the couples might be sitting up in the balcony of the movie theater smooching, and the usher flashes the light on them, you know, like that kind of stuff. Yeah, right? Well, that didn't happen to you, did it? Okay, you just see, like, I remember the old days. And the what's that? Anyway, but look at Peter. Peter felt suddenly brave and adventurous. So that the numinous sound of that name draws something out of him. Susan felt as if some delicious smell or some delightful strain of music had just floated by her. And Lucy got the feeling you have when you wake up in the morning and realize that it is the beginning of the holidays, Christmas, or the beginning of summer. Wow. And again, we're trying to capture that exact feel when we come, you know, we really lose out. I mean, first of all, you know, how can you really have any great writers or artists in Houston? Because we're missing two things in Houston that are often at the basis of great art in general, and that's four seasons, okay? And the other thing is mountains, okay? Everything's flat here. You know, have you been to Colorado and seen a real mountain? And the mountains in Iran. What mountains are there in Iran? In Iran, what are the mountains called there? Okay. They're pretty. Are they high enough to have snow on the top? I think so. Yeah. Okay. So have you ever done any mountain climbing? God, they're wild stuff. Okay, but it's the beauty and wonder of that, right? And that's the way they feel, right? Now, one thing that the movie doesn't do too well, because I don't think it understood it. Okay, Edmund is tempted by the Turkish delight, right? And in the movie, he eats one, he eats another one, and then they throw him away. Okay, now, in the book, he's literally stuffing his face with it. And you need to understand, if you stuffed your face with Turkish delight, you would just throw up. I mean, it's because it's sickly sweet. It's something you don't, but it is magic Turkish delight. It's something that once you eat it, you keep eating and you'll keep eating it until you die. Right? You keep going and going and going and going. And the weird thing about it is that later in the movie, the witch says, your brother betrayed you for sweeties. But in the movie, she asks all her questions, he answers all her questions, and then he gives the Turkish delight. So that's not even true. But here the idea is, while he's stuffing his face, he's giving away all of this information. Right? And the Turkish delight is sort of warping him. It's bad magic food. And, all right, in one of the really meanest parts of the book is when Lucy and Edmund go back, right? And then she's so excited. Peter, Susan, Edmund's been there too. Now he can tell you it's real, it's real. And then Edmund lies. Now, in the movie, this is what they do in the movie. Edmund's looking crazy, and Lucy looks at him and says, what were you doing in Narnia? And then he lies out of fear. But that's not why he lies. Why does he lie? Do you understand why he lies?
It's a protection.
It's a protection, but he's also just being what?
Dumb boy.
He's being mean and nasty. In other words, the Turkish delight. I mean, you could say that. That's a boy. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He's like my son's at that age. You know, he
Yeah.
never do inside.
I'm waiting for another Clinton joke over here. But anyway, it's doing great. This is so crazy. I wonder if people are going to be less careful, because when you wear a mask, you feel like you can do anything you want. You know, like kids when they play the peekaboo game, and they think if they can't see you, you can't see them. You know, like that sort of stuff. Wait a minute, I'm visible. Can you see me? Okay, are you hearing this? But but he just does it out of spite, and that's the thing. Okay, it's. You know, of course I love Paradise Lost, and I've taught it before, But in some ways, Milton does make Satan a little bit too heroic. Right? If you really want to understand the true nature of Satan, of the enemy, the true nature of Satan is not some big charismatic guy running. It is a nasty, peevish, spiteful child who would rather break his own toys than let the other kids play with them. And we need to understand the real nature of evil is nasty, spiteful, peevish. It's a negation. It's a negative. There's nothing grand about it. And that's why he just does it out of spite. There's no fear involved. I understand why the movie did it, because I don't think the movie fully understood that nature of evil that turns in on itself as it stuffs its face and stuffs its face. And he loses. And we find out that he first started going bad when he went to those terrible boys' schools, just like Lewis did. That's when he started going bad, right? And he starts to change. At the end of the book, it says, now he could look you directly in the eyes. No more looking down at his feet and stuff like that. He can look you in the eyes and talk, probably give you a real handshake. Except, by the way, are you finding the same thing I am? When you watch a movie or TV show and people are hugging, you're actually thinking, oh, they're too close. Are you finding yourself doing that? Not out loud, but in my head, I'm actually doing that. This is driving me crazy.
I'm like, man, that's just like a lot of...
Yeah, I'm actually thinking, don't shake hands. This is warping all of us. Oh my gosh. You still hug your children, I hope.
You look people in the eye more.
Oh, maybe. I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's true. It's the only part you can see anymore.
What else to look at?
That's right. There's nothing else to look at. Look at the eyes.
Yeah, talk to them. Yeah.
How do you do?
Could she stop?
And how do you do?
This is great. This is kind of going on. Lupe, are you part of all this craziness?
Oh, yeah.
He is, yeah.
Lights in there every once in a while.
Then we're missing Kelly. That's the thing. We're missing Kelly.
Jump in.
Oh my God! Are all of you friends with the crazy one that lived in England? Oh my gosh!
Chloe.
Chloe, yeah. Did you see her picture?
Did you see her?
Oh my gosh! She's only an actress.
I was like, that was interesting.
I was going to put that, but it didn't seem right for the teacher to say, you look beautiful these days, so I didn't say anything. But she looked like that actress, Glenn Headey. I don't know if you know who that actress is. She looked just like that actress. She was been in a bunch of... Glenn Headley or Headey. Not Lena, not the one that was in Game of Thrones, but Glenn Headey. She was in that silly movie about Dick Tracy and a couple other good movies. But she looked... Oh my gosh. Who was her makeup artist there?
I don't know.
She said a friend of hers or something did it.
But yeah, but I mean, she's now dark. She's totally dyed her hair.
Or something, yeah.
And that's her real color, actually. And so I'm like, why was she ever blonde? You know, she looks beautiful.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, it was just really funny. But, oh
Yeah,
man.
so
So,
interesting.
good stuff. So you getting into this book? Are you getting into this book? And I'll just tell you one more thing that the movie changed because it simply did not understand what was going on. There's that wonderful scene when Susan and Peter go to the professor, right? And they tell him everything that's going on. And the professor says, how do you know your sister's story isn't true? Well, they didn't expect an adult to talk like. And so he asks him a question, and he says, well, does your experience tell you to trust Lucy or trust Edmund? And what do they say? Lucy every time, of course.
Yeah.
Well, then why all of a sudden are you not believing her? And then he does, and I won't read it, but it's in your course pack. I don't know if you know Lewis's Christian writings, but his most famous apologetic for who Jesus was is if you read the Gospels, Jesus makes all these incredible claims to be equal with God, to be the resurrection and the life, to be the way, the truth, and the life, to have the power to forgive sins. He makes all these claims, right? But a lot of people still want to say, well, he's just a prophet, a good man, but nothing else. And Lewis makes this very famous argument where he says, that's the one thing you can't say of him. Because anybody that made those kind of claims to be equal to God, either he was a liar, right? Or he was a lunatic, he was crazy, and there are crazy people that think they're God, or he was Lord, and that's what we call liar, lunatic, Lord.
Yeah.
It's one of these choices. Well, it's fascinating that he does the same thing. He says, well, either your sister is telling lies, and you've already told me she's a truth teller, or she's crazy, but you can tell by talking to her that she's not crazy. So for now, we need to believe her. Maybe she's telling the truth. And they say, well, but it doesn't make sense because she she was only gone for like 5 seconds, and she said she was there all day. And remember what the professor says? That's the part of her story that makes it most true. Do you understand why? Why does that weird detail make it more likely? Remember, Lucy's still a young girl. Is that something she would have made up? Right? If she wanted to make it up, she would have hidden away for 5 hours and then come back and said, I was gone. And I think Lewis has this in mind because, I mean, the most important miracle in the Bible is, of course, the resurrection, that Jesus rose bodily from the dead. And one of the arguments, because I write apologetics books too, one of the arguments people make is, if you were actually making up the story of the resurrection as it's in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, what part would you change? What part would you not have made up if you were trying to make a hoax? Do you know? If you've heard this. Robin's shaking his head. Okay. Who were the first people that discover that Jesus rose from the dead?
Women.
The women, okay? And back then the women were not, they couldn't give their, in court. It was the men that went in court. So if you were making up that, you would not make the women the first. You would make Peter, or even better, Nicodemus or Joseph of Arimathea. And basically the argument is the only reason they would do that is if it's what actually happened. So I think Lewis might have that in mind. But what I want to end on is, again, the movie was very good, and I was surprised the movie kept this. But the movie bungled it because they said, well, then let's believe Lucy. And then he spoils the whole thing by saying, well, we have to believe her. She's family. He builds up this whole logical argument, and then he destroys it by saying she's family. And first of all, I want you to think about that for just 1 second. How does that not make sense? Yeah, brother's family too. So, I mean, right away, it doesn't even make sense. But it's like, they just, and again, I don't even think they were trying to I don't think they understood the whole point. Yeah. But it's just neat how Lewis, an apologist, argues like rationally and logically for Christianity, makes reasonable arguments. But Lewis could take an argument like that and then embody it in a story and make us think about it. Well, what are we going to do with Lucy? I mean, I suppose she could be delusional, but she doesn't seem to be when she's holding on to it, saying all of those facts, all of those sorts of things. So it's just neat that Lewis is writing a children's novel where he's teaching child readers to think logically, right? To think like that. So, you're thinking, Paula?
Yeah. So I did a painting in the spring, a lunatic liar and Lord.
Oh, you did? Oh.
For this guy, it's Dean Dillon. That's one of his songs.
Oh.
He's a big fan of C.S. Lewis, and then wrote this song "If Jesus Was Alive Today," and would he be viewed as a lunatic liar or Lord?
Yeah.
And in the painting itself, then there's some crosses hidden and sort of on his shoulder that goes.
Oh, that's neat.
But I didn't. I knew he was a fan of C.S. Lewis, but I didn't get the connection that he'd written a song. Until this summer when I was visiting with him, and so was, and we were talking. He goes, "What are you taking this year?" And,
oh my gosh!
So it was very interesting.
Well, maybe you'll get something out of this class. Yeah. You could show the piece and then sell it. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
2 for 1.
Yeah. I think so.
2 for 1.
I just 2 more, and then anyway. But I'll send you all the work.
Oh yeah, we see that. That's really neat.
Directly to what
we're
talking about.
Really that's neat.
Yeah.
That's neat. Well, good job, folks. Like I said, we'll try to start a little bit earlier, maybe 6:15 or something like that. And don't worry, we'll kind of go in there slowly and keep reading. We'll finish this, and you might get started with Prince Caspian, but we'll spend most of the time in here. It kind of goes a little more slowly in the beginning. And hello over there. And does anybody